Urgent Somos UX, and this is if Ukraine pull this off, Russians are in big trouble. By channel Adam something. Yes, I think I did the Adam something video on Dubai skyscraper or something if I remember correctly, or something about Dubai. Yeah, it was a good video. Since then I haven't watched any Adam video. I think I'm pretty sure that was from this channel. I remember the logo. So yeah, I guess this is about Ukraine. Why not? Let's watch it. Somebody commented like this is a brief short video, but it's good, I guess. So let's watch it.
The war in Ukraine has been raging for 10 months now. In the first days of the war, Russia made rapid advances on three axes, threatening to conquer Ukraine's east, south and center. Instead, the Russian army suffered a massive defeat around Kiev, then around Kharkiv, then in the southwest around Kherson. Russians are now controlling Crimea, parts of the east, and a strip of land connecting the two. They are on the defensive almost everywhere and have opted to conduct massive terror bombardments of Ukrainian civilian infrastructure with ballistic missiles. All in all, Russians seem to have become stuck with no victory in sight. Or have they? Lately, there has been more and more talk of a second Russian offensive against Kiev, and Ukrainians seem to be struggling somewhat with the defense of Bakhmut, a strategically important city in the east. As winter approaches, what can we expect on the short, mid and long term? Will there be a second Battle of Kiev? Let's take a look. The most important question to answer first and foremost is, what are the current Russian war goals in Ukraine? And the answer is the exact same as before, the conquering of Ukraine. Now you might think that's absolutely ludicrous. After all those defeats and humiliations, 100,000 casualties and currently 8,480 visually confirmed heavy equipment.
Oh my god, 100,000 Russian military casualties. Okay, seriously, we don't process this, right? I mean, at least I don't, right? Whenever I hear news, or maybe just, I don't pay attention because it's too fucked up. I don't know what it is. I don't know how my mind processes this. But I've watched a lot of history videos, right? And I know what number of casualty means in a what war, right? Throughout the history. And just seeing that number, like in just 10 months, 100,000 Russian, this is just Russian military crossing, 100,000. I mean, I get it, like, compared to the previous years, now the population is way too higher. But still, 100,000, that's a big ass number. That's like you hear from some, colossal fucking war of the past, right? Like Napoleonic Wars, 100,000, like holy shit, something like that, right? Some major war, like there was a brutal battle and this happened and it was a decisive war. World will be changed forever. Well, Ukraine and Russia is just going back and forth for the past 10 months and 100,000 just Russians. Like holy shit, that's a big ass number, man.
Losses, does Putin still seriously intend on conquering Ukraine? Yes, that still remains the political goal of this war for Russia. And the Russian leadership plans to achieve this via, for example, bombing Ukrainian civilian infrastructure with ballistic missiles, a war crime, to deprive Ukrainians of heat and energy during winter, thus degrade the morale of both the population and the troops. However, this plan doesn't seem to be working, though they have done significant...
Well, I don't want to pause too much, but I think their mentality is that regardless of we didn't fully dominate like we thought of it. I mean, I saw that first I think 2 videos of Kings in general, their ongoing series, right, which I'm going to watch, right, definitely. But, that Kings and General series, I saw like how my mentality, how it was, like how Russians are occupying Ukraine, and I just had the mentality like they are occupying key strategic places or something, but they are not completely occupying cities or something. But then I realized, wait a minute, Ukraine has literally pushed them all the way back. And that was like, that video was like 8 months or so before. And I'm now seeing it's not much changed, right? So they didn't make that kind of a dominating, changes in Ukraine. And it's been 10 months. I mean, and that's Russia versus Ukraine. It's not like Russia versus US or something like that. So when you hear something like that, like how the fuck you going to dominate Ukraine at this point, if you can even make this kind of a difference? But then he said this, it makes sense. Like Russia has more resources than Ukraine. I guess their last goal is to just stretch it out all the way until Ukraine cannot take it anymore. Like Ukraine cannot even function. They don't have any resources left. They don't have any energy. They're just going to keep bombarding the power stations and shit like that. That's kind of a long-term but fucked up thing, man. That just shows you like, people in power, basically, Kremlin or whatever, don't care about the numbers and casualties. They just care about the end result, even if it takes longer time. That's just fucked up.
Significant damage to Ukrainian power facilities, most Russian ballistic missiles are still getting shot down. From their latest massive barrage of 76 missiles, 60 were shot down by Ukrainian air defense, with some failing on their own before even reaching Ukraine. Meanwhile, partner countries keep supplying electric equipment and generators to help keep the Ukrainian grid operational. And so far they've been successful. In addition, at the time of making this video, it seems more and more likely that the US will deliver its advanced Patriot air defense systems to Ukraine, which would dull the edge of Russian terror bombings even further. But ballistic missiles aimed at civilians civilians is not the only way Putin is trying to get his way. As of the second half of December 2022, rumors are circulating about a new Russian offensive against Kiev. The commander of the Ukrainian military, General Zaluzhny, was quoted saying he has no doubt they will have another go at Kiev. The Institute for the Study of War assesses such offensive to be extraordinarily unlikely to succeed. However, so far, such minor details haven't stopped Russians from trying. If Russians indeed decide to attack, they would need to drag Belarus into the conflict, which Putin...
I think it's a Hail Mary type of attempt. If they take down Kyiv, they just, there's a major morale issue there. Capital's gone. There's going to be, they're thinking that's going to be a big game changer if they can basically succeed in this one.
Seems to be attempting currently. In a very rare personal visit to Belarus, Putin will no doubt try to pressure Lukashenko into joining the invasion. However, for Lukashenko, this is extremely dangerous. If the Belarusian armed forces get chewed up inside Ukraine, and there is a very good chance they would, that would weaken Lukashenko's rule directly, since the only thing keeping him in power is brute force at this point. The Belarusian military is in no shape for an invasion. They have around 50,000 military personnel with obsolete equipment, and they cannot throw everything at Ukraine either, because then who will man the borders, who will keep the order in case people try to overthrow Lukashenko again, and so on. And it's not like Ukrainians would be caught by surprise. Ever since beating the Russians out of the north, they've established proper defenses along the Belarusian border. If the fresh and somewhat prepared...
You think Putin cares about any of that? You think Putin's gonna think, oh, they just have 50,000, they need that. Do you think he cares about that? No. The point is, Belarus became a puppet state somewhat of Russia, right? So now it's just going to be awkward, because obviously Putin's just going to demand, no, you're going to do this, because, that's how it is right now. So Lukashenko is going to be weird position, right? Like, should I just point blank say no to Putin at this point, right? And I guess he already burned bridges around the world by, being a puppet state to Putin, somewhat Russia. And now if he angers the Putin and Russia too, so he's just going to be left alone there. And if he, goes along with Putin, like, he's basically fucked in his own country. There's going to be protests or something. His country will be, left unguarded or something. This is a really weird situation for him.
Russian military couldn't break the original defenses at that time, a worn-down Russian military with ragtag Belarusian support certainly won't break the improved defenses this time. Now let's talk about the Ukrainian objectives. The long-term goal is of course the same: remove Russian troops from the entire territory of Ukraine. The short-term goal is to keep the Russians at bay in the east and gain advantageous positions everywhere via incremental progress. The mid-term goals are far more interesting, however. Ever since the Ukrainian victory and Russian withdrawal in Kherson, there has not been any major breakthroughs along the front lines. That was due to the Ukrainian mud season, which makes large-scale maneuvers practically impossible. However, that certain cold season is coming. In a few weeks, the ground will freeze solid, enabling maneuvers once again. And this is when I believe Ukraine will start another large-scale offensive. But where? In the south, the two armies are separated by the massive Dnipro River. Trying to attack through it would be incredibly difficult, and Ukrainians would run into prepared Russian defensive lines on the other side. In the east, Ukrainians are holding the line and grinding down frustrated Russian assaults, this is the Bakhmut area, and are making incremental advances towards Kremlino and Svatovye in order to cut a major supply line for Russian troops in the area. The front lines are largely static there. I personally doubt we'll be seeing any major offensives in that area in the near future, but I could be wrong, of course. This leaves us with the southeast, a large, flat, open area north of which the Ukrainian military has been massing for months, not coincidentally. This is the most likely area for a large-scale Ukrainian offensive, which I believe we'll be seeing in the coming months. The main objective of the winter offensive would be to take Tokmak and Melitopol, both being major supply hubs, thus cutting Russian forces in half, geographically speaking. If Ukrainians manage to pull it off, I'm fairly certain that would be the beginning of the end for the Russian invasion. And why is that? Currently, Russian troops south of Kherson and in Crimea can be supplied via two routes, one through Melitopol and the other through Kerch. However, the Kerch bridge has been damaged and is out of commission for heavy military echelons for at least half a year or so. Russians therefore have to resort to ferrying supplies to Crimea, which is slow, ineffective and vulnerable. If the Melitopol supply route would be cut...
we heard of that news, right? The Ukraine exploded that bridge, only bridge that connects that part of area. That's really fucked up. I'm just imagining Julius Caesar just laughing like, can't even build a bridge, huh? This is really fucked up. I guess this was long. I guess it was coming. As soon as they blew up the bridge, it was clear that this is their tactic, right? They're going to cut off there and they're going to attack the middle. So it will definitely split the forces. They will strand the southern part of the Russian forces there. That is interesting. But, obviously, Putin knows this. His generals knows this. So I guess they are not going to, let them take that. So there's going to be one fierce fighting, right? I don't think Ukraine is just going to take that like that, but I don't know. If they do, that's a big-ass blow.
the Kerch ferry would be struggling to supply both the Russian invasion force and the civilian population of Crimea. At that point, Russia would find itself in a situation like Kherson, only on a larger scale, where they have a whole lot of troops dug in, connected by a crippled supply line, slowly being ground down by Ukrainian strikes and assaults. But this, I believe, is on the farther end of the Ukrainian midterm goals. So where does all this put Russian mobilization efforts? Can Russia come out with a massive wave of fresh troops to overwhelm Ukrainian defenders and achieve their war goals? No, the Soviet mobilization infrastructure is largely gone. What remains cannot cope with the sheer number of new recruits. Beyond huge issues with training, including the lack thereof, equipping those soldiers is also either subpar or doesn't happen. Many Russian mobilized have to buy their own gear before heading into the combat zone. Such recruits can keep Ukrainian defenders busy, but aren't good for much else, such as complex combined arms maneuvers. I expect that the lack of proper equipment will become an especially severe problem during the cold. Case in point, it's not even the dead of winter yet, but we've already seen Russian troops affected by hypothermia due to lack of winter gear. Whoa. Soldiers also need to be fed more during the cold, as the body burns more calories to keep warm. With the current, degraded, inefficient Russian supply lines, we'll likely see food shortages among Russian troops, further decreasing their combat capabilities. If a well-supplied Ukrainian military attacks then, things could get very ugly very fast for the Russians. To sum up, winter is bound to be pretty hot in Ukraine. The initiative remains firmly with Ukrainians, and Putin or his general, Surovikin, likely won't be able to change that, especially with an ill-fated second assault on Kiev. And if Ukrainians manage to take Melitopol in the south and reach the sea, it would be a game changer for this whole conflict and would mark the beginning of the end for the Russians.
See, the problem with this one is that in modern world, it's not the game of numbers, like how many soldiers you have. Obviously that matters, but I guess it's the modern world, modern equipment, right? There's a question like, are tanks effective anymore, right? There was a question, flying around there, because this is kind of like the biggest modern, at least big power conflict. Big power because Ukrainians are backed by Europe and USA, so that's like a big power can get. And the other side is Russia. Obviously there's been wars in the past decade or so too, or past 2 decades or so, but this feels different. It feels like a Europe side war, right? Big power type of war, right? Even if US and Europe is not directly involved, they are supplying equipments, right? So, and Russia is also like, Putin is probably finding by this point, like maybe he overestimated their power, right? Because we always seen Russia as being the second, top 2 most power in the world. But I guess there was, I always had this like, okay, their GDP is extremely low, right? They don't spend as much money as US does, not by a long shot. And they are the top 2 biggest military. How is that working? But this is kind of answering it now. Like everything's failing. Equipments are failing, right? The mobilization is not working because this is not the Soviet times, right? I guess that big ass gap since World War II to here, that big gap between war is showing rust here basically. Right, so I don't know what morale is in Kremlin or something, but yeah, it's just fucked up. And I think they just thought that, okay, if they're gonna threaten people with nukes, nobody's going to get involved. So nobody did get involved, but they made sure that equipment gets involved, and I don't think they saw that coming. They just saw the Ukraine's not gonna do much by themselves. But they forgot that, okay, even if people don't get involved, that equipment alone is going to be a big ass problem. Because we are in the middle of human power versus technological let's say technological robotic power, whatever, right? We are in the middle of that. So I can imagine a future where there is most of the technology does most of the fighting and not people. I can also imagine just people fighting themselves, like in the really past, right? Where equipment were good, but mostly depended on people. We are in the middle of that, right? We have drones, we have, anti-tank missiles and whatever, right? We have javelins and shit. So the technology is kind of matters now, not just people. And I guess they're finding out that now. And this is why Ukraine has been successful so far, because they have the best technology. US, Europe technology. Germany is sending technology. US is sending technology. And I guess, England is probably sending technology. I don't know. And in one side, it's only Russia. So, yeah, this will show a lot of people like what moving forward, what wars are going to be, if it's going to be worth it or not. Because it's been 10 months and Russia has barely made any progress, right? I always assume that they're going to occupying a lot of places, but that's not the case. Yeah. Right, people, if you like my reaction, don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you next time.